What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of All Out War. I'm Turner, and I'm joined via the internet with Rosie. Rosie, what's up, my man?
Hey, what's up, dude?
How you been?
I've been good.
We're kind of chuckling. You and I are chuckling because we were just dealing with like 30 minutes of technical crap. That's what we were dealing with microphones and internet and whatever else.
And all of a sudden, it worked.
Yeah, right when I was about to give up. Right when I said, we can't do this. It ain't going to work.
Yeah.
God's like, I know I got this.
I have no clue. I did. Oh well.
Oh man, it makes me wonder sometimes what the heck's happening. But anyway,
Yeah.
I was gonna say I'm really glad that this episode that we're gonna talk about tonight is has nothing to do with COVID, and it's on our own thing. We're not gonna mention the stupid coronavirus. That's as far as it's gonna go.
Yeah. You had asked me the previous time that we tried recording this if I was over it, and I am definitely over it, and I was over it from the beginning. So yeah, I don't think we're gonna talk about it ever again.
Yeah, that's cool. Unless there's something weird that like Dr. Lou Wing calls me and tells me about or something, you know.
Yeah.
We'll just keep it. Everyone else is talking about it. We don't need to talk about it too. So
yeah, there's too much out there.
Yeah. So we'll get into what we're going to talk about in a minute. But what do you know, man?
Hey, did you know that you know Penn and Teller, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So in 1995, they made a video game that was never released.
What?
It's called Desert Bus. And the video game is you literally are a driver of a tour bus, and you drive from Tucson, Arizona to Las Vegas, and it takes 8 hours. And the bus never goes more than 45 miles per hour.
It's like ultra realistic, I guess.
Yeah, that's literally it. You don't you just drive.
That's funny, man.
Yeah, listen, it says finishing a single leg of the trip requires considerable stamina and concentration in the face of arch boredom. The vehicle constantly lists to the right, so players cannot take their hands off the virtual wheel. Swerving from the road will cause the bus's engine to stall, forcing the player to be towed back to the beginning.
Oh, no.
The game cannot be paused. The bus carries no virtual passengers to add human interest, and there is no traffic to negotiate. The only scenery is the odd sand-pocketed rock or road sign. Players can earn a single point for each 8-hour trip completed between the two cities, making a Desert Bus high score perhaps the most costly in gaming.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
They need to release it. I guarantee you if they released it, especially during now with everybody in home.
Yeah.
I almost said it. I almost said the C word.
Yeah. I mean, maybe people would I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I would play it. I don't know. I probably would.
Have you been playing video games a lot?
Yeah. I've been playing quite a bit of Battlefield 5 still. Although they just announced that they're killing the game basically in June.
What?
Yeah. So
why?
Well, anyone that knows Battlefield knows that Battlefield 5 from the beginning, like when they released the launch trailer, everyone got mad at them, and then they're like the CEO of the company came out and was like, well, if you don't like it, you don't have to buy it. And so everyone hated them from the start of that, and then it's just been an absolute trash game.
Is this World War I?
Two.
World War II. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think I've played Battlefield 5 yet. I think I only played Battlefield 1.
Yeah, I feel bad because my buddy finally just texted me the other day, and he's like, hey, should I buy the game? I'm like, yeah, I'm always on it. And then literally like the next day, he texted me. He's like, hey, I picked it up. I got the copy of it, and I'm installing it. And I'm like, oh, they're gonna kill it. There's not gonna be any more updates after June.
Are they just gonna leave the servers open so people can play, or are they gonna literally like?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, they're doing one more update, and then they're just not doing any more updates.
So there's no more secret maps and all that stuff.
Yep.
What's the next Battlefield then? Do they have another one coming out?
2021, but they haven't released any details about it, so we'll see. Anyway,
so you know the story, right? Did I think I don't know who it was told me that, or maybe I read it somewhere about why all of these like Call of Duty, Battlefield, they all had to go in different directions. They couldn't go modern warfare because of all of the
trademark.
Yeah, trademark. So like all the weaponry and the tanks and the vehicles and stuff, they wanted the companies that make them wanted their like royalties.
So, that makes sense. Yeah.
So they said, "Oh, well, we'll go to World War I."
Right.
And I think Call of Duty went to like outer space or something like that. They went the other way. And
that makes sense.
Yeah, but I think they resolved all of that now, and so it's likely that because I know they just re-released Call of Duty again with the maps that were like from like probably 12 years ago.
Yeah, I think they re-released
Modern Warfare or something.
Modern Warfare 2, yeah.
Which was a good one. I like that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, because my son's just been playing it like crazy. It's like the 2 times that I let my kid, like I don't get on him for playing video games is in the winter time when he's done with wrestling practice, like wrestling altogether and stuff, or like whatever sport he's playing.
Yeah.
Because he just can't really go out. Like there's not, it's just not a lot to do. It gets dark early and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't mind if he plays that to entertain himself or whatever for a little bit. But during this thing, I've just not even, I haven't even tried.
Oh yeah.
I've heard him at like 3 a.m. playing. I'm like, I'm the worst dad in the world. So.
Yeah. Well, my dad didn't fare much better apparently because I've been doing the same.
Well, you're awesome. So I guess it's not so bad.
Yeah.
Oh man. All right, man. You want to jump in this? Oh wait, what?
I was gonna say, yeah, maybe we should talk about what get on with the episode.
All right. Hey, we're gonna just sit back, grab a coffee, and enjoy.
You're listening to the All Out War podcast.
Yes, you are. This is the All Out War podcast. Hey, I just want to say too before we jump in, I meant to say this at the front end. I just want to thank our listeners. Mm-hmm. We have some great listeners. I was reached out to on Twitter this week, Instagram, and just some really, really fantastic, super kind, really cool, sharing information with us, things that they think that we would, want to know about, or asking us questions about things. So just we have just some amazing. We've accumulated some amazing listeners to this podcast, and I just want to say thank you. We don't take you for granted, and you're probably the best listeners in the world. How's that?
I would agree.
And it'd be so cool if we could meet all of you someday.
I don't know. Maybe not all of you.
We'd let them down.
Just kidding. Yeah.
They'd see us and they'd be like, "Oh, you sound so much. You have a face for radio, right?"
Oh, I definitely do. Yeah. My mom tells me that.
I shaved my head. I thought I'd just throw that out there. But my kids laughed at me when I came out of the bathroom. So I have this big beard and like really, really close shaved head, like less than a number 1. I almost bicked it.
Oh wow!
So
yeah. I'm growing. I'm just letting mine grow. It's a wild mane.
See, I had to do the opposite because I'm interacting with people now at my job, and so I have to be, I have to look presentable, and that was the best. Instead of letting it grow until I can get to like a haircut person,
yeah,
a barber, whatever. Anyways, hey man, let's talk about government operations that are secret.
Yeah. So, okay. Well,
I'm just gonna throw it over to you, man.
All right, cool. So, I guess to set this up, so obviously these are things. This is by no means. I was going to say like each of these things could be episodes on their own, and I think one of the cool things about all the listeners is that if I'm sure they actually do a lot of like their own research. Like you guys listen, I guess you guys, I can say that since you're listening. Like if there's stuff that's interesting, go read about it, because there's tons of books about everything. Like each of these things that we're going to talk about have books written about them. So we're not going to, do a ton of justice to them, but just to give you like a scope of some crazy stuff that's happened. And so the reason that I got this idea, and we were talking about what we should do, and I was like, oh, we should do this. This will be cool. I had a buddy who I guess recently just watched Stranger Things, and he texted this group chat we're in. And he was like, hey, do you guys know about MK Ultra? And I was like, yeah.
Do you know about it?
Yeah. And he was like, can you guys believe that's a real thing? I'm like, yeah. Have you really never heard about it? He was like, no, I haven't. I was like, oh my God, dude. Like, how have you not heard about this? And he's like, I don't know. And it's funny because he's and I'm not going to say anything, but he should be aware of stuff like this. So anyways, he was like, is there any more crazy stuff that the government's done like this? Like MK Ultra? I was like, oh my God, you have no idea. And
did you had to have just looked at him and been like,
smoking that sticky green stuff.
I told him we better start doing that and then dive into some books I'm going to send him.
That's right.
But anyways, so I thought it'd be a good topic, and you hear a lot about things like MK Ultra. I think we've talked about it on one of the early conspiracy podcasts about conspiracy theories, and that one happened to be true. So I'll just gloss over it. But anyway, so we're going to do at least this episode and another episode on some other ones that you might have not heard of, because I would guess that most of you guys that have listened to this know about MK Ultra. I'll gloss over it really, really briefly. And some of the stuff that I'm going to read about will go into detail about certain aspects of it. So, but basically, MK Ultra, starting in I think the late mid 50s until 72 or 73, was this overarching project designation. Like MK Ultra was the designation that there's hundreds of different sub projects that were all run by the CIA. And basically, it was looking into using, I guess, different kinds of science. So there's a lot of stuff where they're doing mind control. So that's like one of the big things, I guess. I've never seen Stranger Things, but apparently...
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
My iPad...
went off?
Yeah,
it's okay.
Sorry, I was going through my notes. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. So MK Ultra is basically this overarching name that they gave, and there's a lot of sub projects that happen. But basically, they were worried. World War II ended. We still have to fight the commies, and we're going into Cold War. And we basically heard that the Russians were using all kinds of crazy technology stuff, like using hallucinogenic drugs and different kind of fringe psychology methods to create, like Manchurian candidates, these kind of people. And so basically we decided we're going to do that stuff and try to make sure that we can, counter it or be better than them. So that's kind of what, the milieu of the culture back in, almost 20 years that the CIA was doing. And so they did a lot of different stuff, a lot of different tests. But so that's basically MK Ultra was focused on this big overarching thing with mind control. They used different kind of drugs, a lot of hallucinogenics. And so I'm going to read.
Let me ask you a question. I don't know if you said this or not, because I was trying to pull up my notes while you were starting it off.
Sure.
Were these scientists, were these the same guys that were part of Project Paperclip?
Some of them, yeah. So yeah, that's a. I'm not sure exactly, because a lot of the Operation Paper. So how about we'll say this? Operation Paperclip is a big one that I think most of you guys might have heard about. So I didn't choose that. Maybe we can go into that on a different one. But basically, Operation Paperclip was at the end of World War II. Hitler had these crazy scientists, mostly rocket scientists, like Werner von Braun was a big one, and basically, in order to not let all their research go to waste, basically, because a lot of people may not know this, that the Nazis were technologically superior to us in like every way, almost every way, to the United States. They're probably 10, 15 years ahead technologically with their spaceships or rockets in World War II. So basically, we defeat the Nazis and we offer immunity to all these high-ranking. They're mostly like, I think it was like 150, somewhere up there in the hundreds. Between 100 and 150, mostly rocket scientists that we granted immunity. Will say, you come over here, you help us build a, give us this technology, and we'll not prosecute you for war crimes. And so that was Operation Paperclip. Is basically we smuggled all these Nazi scientists over.
So the reason I asked was because one of the things that people talk about a lot with those scientists that came over is that they were mixed up with, a lot of them were involved in the occult, and they also were trying to do some really crazy stuff, experiments. That's why it would seem like that they would want to be involved with the MK Ultra stuff, with the hallucinogenic drugs and the mind control and things like that.
Yeah, well, they definitely were doing a lot of occult stuff. I don't know. So here's another big thing about MK Ultra. So as much as, I don't know, it's kind of sad. I say that, like, sadly, we don't know the full extent, because basically right before they had to testify, and when they released, I can't remember what, I think it's called like the White something commission, where the Senate opened a commission, an investigation into the CIA, and that's when all these documents became public.
Oh, that was the Betty White Commission. That was a joke.
Sorry, I'm not old enough to get it.
Oh man, that's.
But yeah, it's okay. But I think it was the Whitehurst. But anyway, so the CIA before that, they destroyed hundreds of thousands of documents. So that's why. Really, MK Ultra is just basically the same old stuff. So there's a lot of, but anyways, so that's that operation. And then that's Operation Paperclip. The Nazis brought them over. So I thought that there'd be some cool ones to dive into some other stuff that people might not have heard of. And so to go off of this, I want to read something which was a part of MK Ultra, but this kind of explains a little bit more about a certain thing. So this one was called Operation Midnight Climax. So
Midnight Climax, huh?
And it is exactly what it sounds like.
Oh, gee whiz.
Well, so listen to this.
There's a reason we have explicit rating on this podcast.
Yeah, but this is the government. There you go.
Yeah.
So it says, on April 13, 1953, CIA Director Allen Dulles authorized Project MK Ultra, the controversial series of experiments aimed at developing mind control techniques and discovering a truth drug. Agents dosed subjects with LSD and other psychotropic narcotics, hypnotized them, and exposed them to radiation and electroshock therapy.
Wow.
Some of the participants volunteered, but others did so unwillingly and unwittingly. The CIA attempted to destroy all records of the program, leaving behind only 7 boxes of official files overlooked during the document purge. So basically, the only reason that we know about this stuff is because it was an accident that they didn't get destroyed.
Oh, wow.
So it says,
wow.
Yeah. But a few stories survived. One of the strangest revolves around a series of uncontrolled experiments named Operation Midnight Climax. CIA operatives involved with Midnight Climax hired prostitutes in San Francisco, and it also happened in New York, to lure clients back to brothels. Once there, the agents secretly drugged their targets and watched them engage in sexual activities from behind a two-way mirror. America's spies began searching for mind control substances during World War II, As a conflict raged, the Office of Strategic Services, the precursor to the CIA, implemented a truth drug program in hopes of discovering a means to coerce prisoners of war to reveal their secrets during interrogations. The OSS initially toyed with a concentrated liquid form of marijuana rather than the newly discovered LSD. George White.
It's so funny. It's like full circle, dude. Because now we have all these vape cartridges with liquid THC.
Yeah.
Right. And the honey pots.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the honey pot. That's basically what they were trying to do, right? Get them in a sexually compromised position and then be able to hold it over their head, right?
No. This was they did this to regular Americans, citizens, in order to see if the techniques would be able to be used. So it wasn't against. They weren't trying to blackmail anybody.
Okay, so it's almost like the pre-honey pot, right? Like,
yeah, I guess they're trying to figure out basically if the techniques. They're trying to figure out if they could use this in the, I guess, for future honey potting. I guess maybe.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll keep going on. As World War II ended and the Korean War intensified, the CIA and the Pentagon grew concerned over reports that foreign intelligence agencies had developed brainwashing methods of their own. These rumors and blah, 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 blah. Sidney Gottlieb, and this is the guy who got really thrown under the bus in all the documents, because basically his name was the only name that was not redacted.
Oh, wow.
From the things. Yeah.
Wow.
So Sidney Gottlieb, the head of the chemical division of the CIA's Technical Services Division, urged Alan Dulles, who was the head of the CIA, to approve testing LSD as a potential mind control or brainwashing substance. Dulles agreed. So this keeps, let's see. So, okay. Gottlieb brought White, who is a guy that worked for him, a rock'em sock'em cop nut overly carried away with playing spook, into the program as a consultant. White started in Greenwich Village, where he administered LSD, knockout drops, and marijuana to his unwitting guests using food, drinks, and cigarettes, then tried to get them to talk.
Is a knockout drop, is that like something you put in a drink?
Yeah, I assume they're probably using some sort of like roofie. Something like GHB, roofie.
Yeah.
So it said it didn't take White long to veer the experiments in the direction of illicit sex. He transferred to San Francisco in 1955 and set up a brothel in the city's Telegraph Hill neighborhood. Gosh. He wanted the spot to have a, quote, a French whorehouse look. The operative decorated the walls with some French guy's prints, paintings, photos of can-can dancers, and images of women in bondage. To complete the setup, he installed two-way mirrors for agents to sit behind and watch. It was supposed to look rich, but it was furnished like crap. One narcotics agent who frequented the location told this guy. The prostitutes picked up the Johns, who are the just regular guys, at local bars and brought them back to the makeshift brothel. While it said his fellow okay, there's a spelling error in this article, but it said while his fellow agents preferred men from working class or financially disadvantaged backgrounds, the idea was that the subjects with limited social status would attract the least attention and be less likely to cause any issue. So they're going after these poor people.
Yeah. It's a really similar tactic, though, isn't it, to the MK? Remember, they would find compromising people that were easily that would kind of down on their luck, homeless people even.
Yeah, this is part of MK Ultra.
Okay, so they're just kind of using the same technique, I suppose, for finding the people to use.
Yeah.
What's crazy to me when I think about this, there's two things. I'm sorry to cut you off there.
No, go ahead.
One is that this is the 50s, the early 50s too. It's not the late 50s.
Yeah.
And the drug use was very advanced. I didn't even realize that these drugs were that accessible at this point. And then secondly, this is our federal government. They're putting up a whorehouse in a neighborhood. Can you imagine if that was, you lived in that neighborhood?
Exactly.
And all of a sudden there's like a brothel, like right down the street from your house, you know? And it's because of the government? What in the world?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Okay, sorry. I just was just crazy.
No, yeah. I mean, it is crazy to think about. And I do want to pause and maybe take a step back. So that's basically it. So that's basically the story, is that they set up whorehouses. Agents watched them. They went, they hired these prostitutes to go out, bring these guys back. They drugged them beforehand. And I was reading something else, is that basically they tried these techniques, I guess like what you said, honeypotting. They're trying to, so basically the CIA is trying to find a drug that's like makes people talk.
Right.
That's what they're looking for. This wonder drug that they can give someone, like the truth serum.
Yeah. What's the combination? Is it going to be sex and alcohol and a little bit of drugs, and maybe it's something special?
Right.
What's it going to be, so they can get information? The whole goal is to get another spy in a situation and then work it. Right.
Yeah. So if they, and I did read this, that, so that's basically it, but for that particular thing, and they found that, so they tested when these men were more likely to actually start talking about like their personal lives, and like start actually spilling the beans, and they found it actually happened right after sex.
Oh yeah.
So it wasn't before, it was after, and so obviously they're going to use stuff like that.
Yeah. So there's like a real natural thing that happens, endorphins and comfort, and you feel like a man after a sexual encounter like that, he feels like he's dominant, like not that's probably the worst word. He's succeeded. He feels like internally he feels like the way that those hormones and endorphins and things that rush give him a confidence, and so feels more accomplished and successful. I don't know how to phrase it all. This is just from experience, but also just knowing like what happens in a situation like that. So it makes sense that they would want to talk, that they would start to open up. You know what I mean? They feel less vulnerable too.
Sure. Yeah.
Because they've just been in a super vulnerable situation. Like, you don't get much vulnerable than completely without clothes on in front of another person that you don't even really know.
Yeah, exactly. So I do want to, I want to stress that one of the biggest things that I think is important to stress is that by us talking about these things, we're not necessarily, I mean, I was going to say, I don't want people to think that like all of a sudden we can't trust, our government and like the CIA, and they need to be brought down. We're not calling for like any kind of revolt or anything, because the CIA and the Defense Department, they do a lot of stuff, obviously that we don't know about. But there's, they do a lot of good stuff, and they do keep us safe. So don't, I think we have to caution and remind people that, they do a lot of really, really good stuff, and they do keep us safe. And we're not just bashing them to bash them. We're just talking about stuff.
Yeah. Of course.
So
I want to add to that the tactics that are required for our enemies, they change with the enemy. When we're talking about Russians or Germans, for that matter, they're first world countries at that point, before they got declined into second world countries after the war and stuff. But they also were using the same techniques and similar techniques, versus the war on terror, for instance, against Al Qaeda or ISIS, very different tactics. You're not going to go and honeypot necessarily, although it does happen. It's just a different way to get information, to know what the enemy's doing.
Sure.
So, that's why they kind of had to go to those levels and experiment in those with those things. And I'm not condoning it at all. Like, I'm not saying it was okay, but I am just saying that, look, when you got to win, you got to go to some dark places sometimes.
Yeah, I think the key point is what you said is, and how actually that article I read started it off, was that we found out the Russians were doing this, and so we don't want to be left behind. So if they're going to be doing stuff like this, it's only, so
Right.
Say if we didn't have any nukes right now, and we knew that North Korea, our enemy, China or North Korea, are working on nuclear technology, we would be really stupid not to be doing stuff.
Right.
And so there's a difference when it goes into unsuspecting people and doing all this kind of stuff. But anyways, I just wanted to put that disclaimer out that we're not just straight up bashing these people that, did this stuff.
I mean, too, think about it too. Like, think of the guy that his assignment was to go sit on the other side of the glass.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Johnson, you're up. Wait, I don't really want to go to the whorehouse tonight. Hey, it's for God and country.
Exactly.
We got to get rid of the commies, Johnson. Get in there. All right.
You got to do it. All right. So here's another one.
Okay.
It's called MK Often. This one, again, and as we start talking about some of these other ones, particularly about from the CIA, obviously I set it up. A lot of the files are deleted, or not deleted, well, I guess permanently deleted, but they're destroyed, so they say. And so a lot of this stuff is, some of these just don't have a ton of information. Like, there's missing parts and stuff like that. But anyways, so this one is called MK Often. And this is part of another one of MK Ultra's, underneath that big branch.
Mm-hmm.
So it says MK Often and Black Magic Mind Control.
Oof.
MK Often would be a joint effort between the CIA and the Department of Defense, and it would be perhaps one of the most bizarre of the currently known sub-projects of MK Ultra, as it would be alleged to include the use of occultism and ritual magic. According to the Department of Defense, however, the goal of MK Often and its sister project MK Search was to, quote, test the behavioral and toxicology reports of certain drugs on animals and humans. Gordon Thomas, the British investigative journalist and author, would claim that Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, chief of the...
Did you say Gottlieb? Wasn't that name used in the other one?
Yeah, this is the guy that was in charge. He was the guy who was in charge of all of MK Ultra.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry.
It's okay. Yeah.
I'm a little slow on the uptake. Sorry.
It's okay. Claimed that Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, chief of the CIA's Technical Services Branch, used Operation Often to explore the world of black magic and harness the forces of darkness and challenge the concept that the inner reaches of the mind are beyond reach. As part of Operation Often, Dr. Gottlieb and other CIA employees visited with and recruited fortune tellers, palm readers, clairvoyants, astrologists, mediums, psychics, specialists in demonology, witches and warlocks, Satanists, and other occult practitioners, and more. It says this Thomas, who's this investigative journalist, would go on to detail an event where apparently the CIA in 1972 even approached the Monsignor, who was in charge of exorcisms for the Catholic Archdiocese of New York, who refused to cooperate. So
he didn't want to get jumped up in on that noise.
Right. It said by May 1971, Operation Often had 3 astrologers on its payroll whose specific task was to predict the future. By 1972, 2 Chinese-American palmists, who are people that read palms, had been employed to probe how hand reading could be developed for intelligence work. It said research was conducted into black magic. The Scientific Engineering Institute funded a course in sorcery at the University of South Carolina.
Gee whiz.
Another investigative journalist and researcher, Alex Constantine, would also discover another significant CIA scientist's involvement in occult research under Operation Often. Dr. Martin T. Orn's testimony also adds some interesting history to the MKUltra project that would otherwise be lost, including MK Often's possible connections to the forming of CIA cults like the Finders in Jonestown. So that's some other stuff. We can talk whole episodes about that.
Yeah.
And the moving of MKUltra to private facilities to avoid government oversight. So this is some from this article. The secondary source of funding for Dr. Orn's work in hypnotic suggestion and dissolution of memory is eerie in the cult child abuse context. So some of you might so this is where a lot of the stuff, like we did the episode with John Brisson about the Finders, and he was talking a lot about that cult with the CIA connections or possible CIA connections and all the intelligence stuff. This is where a lot of that same kind of stuff comes out of when people did more research. But this is it is the stuff that the CIA was working on: hypnotic suggestion and dissolution of memory. So it said, this was the year that the CIA's Office of Research and Development geared up to study parapsychology and the occult. The investigation, dubbed Project Often Chickwit, it's hyphenated, gave rise to the establishment of a social laboratory by SEI scientists at the University of South Carolina, a college class in black witchcraft, demonology, and voodoo. So, the CIA started up a class at this college, black voodoo. Dr. Orn, with SEI funding, marked out his own mind control corner at the University of Pennsylvania in the early 1960s. In a letter to Dr. Orn, Marx once reminded that he disavowed knowledge of his participation in the one mind-wrecking experimental sub-project. Orn later recanted, admitting that he'd been aware of the true source of funding all along. Testimony before the 1977 Church Commission. That's the one. That's the one I missed. I thought it was something else. I think I said white, but it's the Church Committee.
Gotcha.
Testimony before the 1977 Church Committee's probe of the CIA hinted that, as of 1963, the scientific squalor of the CIA's mind control regimen, codenamed MKUltra, had abandoned military and academic laboratories, fearing exposure, and mushroomed into cities across the country. Confirmation arrived in 1980 when Joseph Holsinger,
it just keeps going. Like, we're talking like 30 years.
Yeah. Confirmation arrived in 1980 when Joseph Holsinger, an aide to the late Congressman Leo Ryan, who was the one that was murdered by a death squad at Jonestown. He was the one that went to go investigate and try to bring people back. Exposed the formation of eccentric religious cults by the CIA. Holsinger maintained that a CIA rear support base had been in collusion with Jones to perform medical and mind control experiments at the People's Temple. Rather than terminating MKUltra, the CIA shifted its programs from public institution to private cult groups, including the People's Temple. So there's a lot more stuff there, but that's basically... So MK Often is kind of giving you some more scope of, these projects, which is pretty crazy to think about, that the CIA is looking into witchcraft. They're hiring astrologists.
Yeah.
They're doing all this kind of stuff to...
Well, it's like Get the Edge. It's like, what was that? Like, sometimes our science fiction movies are not so far off. You know what I mean? Like, there a lot of times some of these science fiction movies that we see are based out of some kind of like nugget of reality and they just build a story around it. When I was thinking about, they were trying to do astral projecting, trying to learn how to do that so that they could, what was it? Oh shoot. Goats. What is it? The
Men Who Stare at Goats.
Yeah.
I think that's, what was that project called? It is, I didn't talk about that one because I think a lot of people probably know about that one, but yeah, exactly. They're doing remote viewing
Remote viewing, not astral projecting. Sorry. Yeah.
That was Operation Stargate. I think that's what that one was called.
Okay. But I guess my point is that
Wait,
they're going to just go anywhere they need to go to try and get the edge so that they can know that go defeat the enemy, and if they can take palm reading and they can teach an agent how to recognize a palm, they can tell, maybe they can tell about the person's character or what their weaknesses or flaws are based on that palm design or whatever of the outline. I mean, I don't know how you could do all that, but I'm just trying to make it make sense. I don't know what a warlock would need to be for, but I guess, when you're starting to look at a genre and see what you can pull out of a genre for your own benefit, you're going to go to the fullest extent. So we'll look at New Age paganism over here, and then we'll look at Satanism over here, and everything in between. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think many people may not know this, and this is just an interesting thing to think about, is one of the things that the CIA is really known for is they use stuff that may be available, but they use it in a way that people don't know about. Mm-hmm. So it's like, so you might be thinking, well, why do we need to read palm? Or, how can that possibly help? Like a palm reader. But, there's the CIA and the way of these thinking differently. And because you have to remember they're not dealing with specific, like the NSA is all signals intelligence. So they gather signals that's, nowadays that's computer, that's
digital,
all
digital
stuff like that. But intelligence and actually recruiting spies. So they're, we may never actually know, since neither of us work for the CIA.
Or do we? No, I'm just kidding.
But how the stuff may be used. So what's crazy to think about is, the world may never really know that maybe one of these, something that they learned from a Chinese American palm reader might have stopped a terrorist attack somehow.
Right. I mean, I don't want to attribute to divination and witchcraft and all that, but
no, there might be they're like, hey, we do, there's this technique that we do that does this, or there's something to it. And, if you read about Project, I think it's Stargate, the one with the Many-Steric Goats, the guys who did remote viewing, they did get some stuff right. They got a lot of stuff, that was wrong. But they did get some stuff right, and there was psychic abilities. So I guess I should back it up. If anyone doesn't know, remote viewing is basically where they would get these people who were psychically inclined to think about, basically they would put them in a room and they'd say, start thinking about like Russian submarines or something. I don't know exactly how they would do it.
Right. Yeah.
And these guys would tell them, oh yeah, there's like a ship going from this place to that place and it's carrying these weapons. And then they, go out there and search, and there actually is a ship going from this place to that place, but the name's a little different and it's actually carrying exactly what they said. So remote viewing is basically mental projection. And so some of the stuff they did get right, but
which is the whole nother episode, like how that works. I wonder if our former guest, Dr. Heiser, has ever done anything on Fringe Pop, his podcast about that, like the whole psychic stuff.
Oh yeah. He might have. We probably should check. Yeah. So here's another interesting thing that one of the ones that you might have not thought about, and I think this is a good example. So it says a CIA memorandum for MKUltra subproject 142 describes the control of animals through stimulation of brain electrodes.
Ooh.
The overall goal was clear: to control the mind and behavior and to create disassociation through the combination of drugs, hypnosis, blah, 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 blah. The ability to create limited controlled amnesia through a variety of methods was a primary goal of mind control. It said brain electrode experiments were also conducted on humans. Dr. Jose Delgado, a neurosurgeon and professor at Yale, received funding for brain electrode research on adults and children. He was able to control the movements of his animal and human subjects by pushing buttons on a remote transmitter box. In one paper, Dr. Delgado describes the cats as mechanical toys. So I think that's a really interesting thing. It's just this little snippet. Obviously, it's talking about some specific sub-project. And I just wanted to read that because one of these other things that is really interesting is this project. We were talking about, how the CIA thinks outside of the box. There's a project called Acoustic Kitty, which basically they took this cat and they hooked up a microphone in its ear and put a wire down the back of its spine, like a transmitter wire. They installed this, and they installed a power source going down the front. These are all underneath the skin. And so basically, and then they spent 5 years and about $20 million to do this project where they took this cat and
I know the story.
basically made it a microphone.
Like a spy cat.
Yeah, and they trained it to go do commands, or they tried to, so they could say, basically tell this cat, all right, you're going to go down the hall. And so the first time they actually implemented it, there's these two, I guess, adversaries or people that they wanted to listen to the conversation. And so they had the cat go across the street. They released it across the street, and it was going to go run and go,
on its
go
mission.
close
Yeah.
on its mission. And it got run over by a taxi.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
That poor cat went through hell, man. He got operated on. Its spine had a wire down it. Man, that thing he was probably like, you know what? I'm done. I'm going to run under this taxi cab.
Right. Yeah. So I thought that was a really interesting thing that, so they're talking about,
well,
not only electric, but go ahead.
All the pigeons are fake, right? They're all spying on us.
Oh, no.
Have you heard that conspiracy theory?
Oh, the birds aren't real.
Birds aren't real. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that one. But so I've got another one.
Well, hold on, because I'm not done. I wanted to talk about that one for just a second more.
Sure.
So they would take and try and control animals with different types of electrodes and like implants or something like that in their brains.
Yeah. So basically what they did is they set up, because, modern science back then even, certain parts of the brain, we know exactly this controls this, and the brain, basically all it is a mass of tissue, and it's electronic. This is very simplified, but as far as my knowledge is that it's basically just electronic signals that get sent from one part of the brain to the other. Move your arm, move your left arm, move it this degree, and that stuff. And so the brain just sends these and decodes them. And so they basically knew, okay, if we send a electric
right, it mimics the brain's
exactly.
Yeah.
So,
or the mind, if you will.
Right. So they did. Yeah. A good call, catch on that. We didn't fully talk about that. So they did have the Acoustic Kitty, which is one thing, but they did also, like what I read, actually do implantations on cats and dogs, and were able to, like with a remote control, make them walk around, and they could control all of their limbs. And
that's so freaky.
Yeah.
I wonder what it felt like for the animal. Like if it felt like, because it's not initially thinking I want to walk, and then all of a sudden it's walking, right?
Right.
Because your consciousness it can't override your consciousness, can it? Like, I don't know. It's just kind of scary to think about.
Yeah.
And now we got like Elon Musk, who wants us to like put these nanoparticles in our brains and hook us up to the Neuralink.
Yeah.
What in the world? I ain't doing that, man.
No, not me.
I mean, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I don't, I'm not into that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear you. So I was going to say the next one I have is pretty interesting, and I think this just recently got released, like within the last couple of years, I think. But I just started seeing articles for it in the last couple of weeks. So this is something that actually doesn't deal with the CIA. I guess it does, but it's a little bit different. But this is a more recent one, and I thought it was really interesting to see a different side of some projects that, it's in a different vein. So
Okay.
it says, I'm just going to go ahead and read this article. There have been a few moments in the past few years when a conspiracy theory is suddenly demonstrated to be based in fact. Once upon a time, it was an absurd suggestion that the NSA had data taps in AT&T buildings across the country, which was true. Just like Snowden's revelations confirmed those conspiracy theories, a news report in February confirmed some theories about Crypto AG, a Swiss cryptography vendor. So it says the whole story reads like a Cold War era spy thriller, and like many of those novels, it all starts with World War II. As a result of a family investment, Boris Hagelin found himself at the helm of Akti Borleget Cryptograph, later renamed to Crypto AG in 1952, which was a Swedish company that built and sold cipher machines that competed with the famous Enigma machine. At the start of the war, Hagelin decided that Sweden was not the place to be and moved to the United States. This was a fortuitous move, as it allowed Hagelin to market his company's C-38 cipher machines to the U.S. military. That device was designated the M209 by the Army and became the standard in-the-field encryption machine. In an interesting intersection of history, the M209 caught the interest of Dennis Ritchie and Robert Morris, both Unix pioneers who worked at Bell Labs. Together with James Reeds, they wrote a paper on the statistical cryptanalysis of the cipher and concluded that their technique could decipher an unknown message of at least 2,500 characters with almost perfect accuracy in just a few minutes on the PDP-11. So basically, as a different piece of thing, you have these two computer programmers who work on...
You
okay?
Yeah. Sorry, I kicked my chair. Sorry.
It's okay. So you have these two computer programmers back in the day. Computers were a lot different back then.
Yeah.
And they wrote this paper where they were able to come up with a technique that basically decoded with perfect accuracy up to 2,500 characters. They could break this encryption.
Wow.
So they wrote this paper, and it says so I just wanted to explain what all that stuff I just read.
Yeah.
Ritchie's written recollection of the matter involves a relevant anecdote. As part of preparing the paper for publishing, the authors also submitted it to the NSA for review. It made enough of an impression that Ritchie and Morris got a visit from a quote-unquote retired gentleman from the NSA sometime around 1978. According to Ritchie, quote, the agent didn't particularly care about the M209. What they did care about was the method that Reeds had discovered. What they did care about was that the method that Reeds had discovered was applicable to the systems that were in current use by particular governments. And that even though it was hard to imagine that these people would find the paper and relate it to their own operations, which used commercially available crypto machines, the result of that visit was the decision to delay publication indefinitely. As cool as it, I'll just go ahead. As cool as it is to see some Unix heroes show up unexpectedly, perhaps the most interesting element of this anecdote is the reasoning for the unofficial request not to publish. Other governments are using commercially available crypto machines that were vulnerable to this attack, and the NSA wanted to keep that information quiet. After the success of the M209, Hagelin moved back to Sweden and reestablished his company there before finally moving himself and the company to Switzerland. The CIA and the NSA, which was then called the AFSA, kept tabs on the activities of Hagelin and Crypto AG.
Oh, I bet they did.
Yeah. A new machine was under development, which was called the CX52, and that worried the spooks back in the States. It says, you see, even during the war, it had been discovered that a C38 encoded message could be broken in just a few hours. The new CX52 was extremely difficult to decrypt, meaning that the NSA would lose their all-seeing eye into communications around the world. The NSA had a secret weapon in the form of William Friedman, who was a chief cryptologist for the NSA, as well as a personal friend to Hagelin. In 1951, at the Cosmos Club in Washington, D.C., Friedman made an informal proposal to Hagelin. Crypto AG would restrict the sales of newer, more secure machines to a list of approved customers, and the U.S. would then reimburse him for the lost sales. The men shook hands on the gentleman's agreement and then waited for the slow process of making that agreement official. So the wheels of government turned slowly indeed, and it was February 1955 before the agreement was finalized. So that's nearly 5 years.
Wow.
In addition to the money and sales restrictions, the NSA would produce the instruction manuals for the improved machines. So not only that, it's been suggested that the NSA produced manuals included intentionally misleading instructions intended to weaken the encryption of Crypto AG machines for specific users. In 1967, Crypto AG released the H460, an electronic encryption machine. This should have represented another massive leap in encryption strength over the older mechanical models, and it likely would have been such a leap had the NSA not been the primary designer of the new system. How did they compromise the security of the system? So this is going to get a little bit technical, but it's interesting. It appears that they manipulated the random number generator at the heart of the system, such that at a known interval, the random numbers, quote unquote, would repeat. The list of approved customers received units without the compromised generator, but H460 devices sent to the rest of the world had this intentional weakness built in from the factory. When the NSA received a communication that had been encrypted using a weakened H460, they could decrypt it in seconds rather than months.
Wow.
So
it's like a back door.
That's exactly it. Yep. So they built a back door, and knowing the United States, it's going to go into different ones. I won't speculate too much. It says, though it wasn't entirely without conflict, the agreement between the NSA and Hagelin lasted until his retirement. Boris Hagelin had planned to pass the company to his son, Bo Hagelin, but Bo died in a car crash in Washington, D.C. area in 1970.
Oh, did he?
Shortly after this event, Boris Hagelin stepped down from the leadership of the company, and a buyout of the company was carried out. A series of shell companies were used to mask the identity of the new owners of Crypto AG, but recently declassified documentation reveals the truth of the matter. Crypto AG was purchased in a joint venture between the CIA and the West German BND.
Oh, I never saw that coming.
Yeah. From 1970 until 2018, one of the foremost providers of encryption equipment for governments around the world was secretly a covert operation run by these two intelligence agencies.
Gosh.
This operation was eventually known as Rubicon.
Oh.
So, the details of Rubicon were chased down by a group of journalists as well as the Crypto Museum in the Netherlands. Most of the information presented here is distilled from the Crypto Museum and the Washington Post story, blah, 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 blah. It says an unexpected benefit was that Crypto AG was a profitable business. The paperwork of the business was handled by the BND, who then shared profits with the CIA. Excuse me. This arrangement persisted until 1993, when the CIA bought out the German involvement in the project. By this time, the financial profitability of Crypto AG had faded, but many governments were still using their products. So here's a couple of real-world uses, which is interesting. says, we have a few glimpses into the intelligence that Crypto AG helped to gather. In 1978, the Egyptian president came to Camp David to negotiate a peace accord, and his communications were quote-unquote secured using Crypto AG hardware. In 1979, after the Iranians captured American hostages, President Carter's negotiations relied heavily on intelligence captured through Crypto AG hardware. An example that included some fallout was the bombing of a West Berlin club in 1986. Because of this program, the NSA was able to conclusively determine that Libya was behind the bombing. The decision was made to be precise when revealing what the U.S. knew about the bombing coordination, giving hints to the nature of NSA capabilities. So that's one of those really interesting things that is scary to think about, is when the government can't say how they got the information, and they just say, you need to trust us, because they don't want to obviously give up the fact that they have all these backdoors and all these encryption things.
Well, what's cool is that, I mean, for us, what's cool, because we're American and it totally helped us, but was we created the actual machines that would do the encrypting, like, you know, that would decrypt, I guess. Was decrypt, is that a right word?
Well, yeah, it was a Swiss company, but yeah, we owned it basically.
Yeah, we were controlling it for sure. But the word Rubicon is really interesting, that they would call it Rubicon, the operation or whatever.
Right.
So there's a couple definitions of Rubicon, but it's reference to it's definitely a strategy and like connected to like a game or some kind of competition. But the best definition I came across was, it's an idiom, or the idiom cross the Rubicon has an ancient origin. To cross the Rubicon means that you make a decision or take a step that commits one to a specific course of action from which there is no turning back. The expression cross the Rubicon refers to a decision made by Julius Caesar. So the whole idea is, let our enemies speak in this encryption, and we know what it means, but they don't know we know what it means.
Exactly.
So allow them to keep making these decisions and going in the course that they are, but they're going to get to a point where there's no return, and that's when we got them.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. And so, I mean, and this is interesting now that it just got, I think it said 2018 was just basically when the first information started getting declassified. But it's really interesting to think about all this kind of stuff, and the stuff that we don't know about again. Yeah. So it's not to make you guys paranoid, but you should be a little paranoid.
Well, if you don't have anything to be paranoid of or about, then if your conscience is clear, right? If you're an upstanding citizen, you don't have to worry about anything. Like, I always joked around with, and I hate it. Absolutely. I hate my privacy being infringed on. 100% hate it. But I always joked around. I was like, if they ever tap my computer or use the Alexa to listen in, you know what they're going to hear? You know what they're going to find?
Jesus.
Right. They're going to like look through all my files on my computer, and they're going to see about 800 sermon notes, you know, from sermons that I gave over the last 15 years. They're just going to find stuff like that. And, you know, even if they go to my browsing record or whatever, history or whatever, they're not going to find anything. Well, since we've been doing this podcast.
Yeah. I was going to say, I don't know if I'd be that cautious anyway.
It's like, who is Jack Parsons, right? You know,
yeah.
Start doing secret society stuff when we were doing all that research. I mean, you got to do the research somehow, right? So.
Yeah, exactly.
But I guess I could use my kid's computer, but
yeah, get them on the list.
Get them on the list. Yeah. But yeah, so but I love the fact that the strategy behind it. I love the fact that they got in ahead of it. You know what I mean? Yeah,
I do want to say one thing though. I do disagree with you about the You know what? No, I'm not going to say that on public. I agree. It is. I have nothing to hide, NSA, FBI. I have nothing to hide. I totally am cool with you guys. There's nothing here. So go on. On the record.
On the record. Oh, that's so funny.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, our phones are tracking us anyways. So everything. They listen, they do all that.
Oh yeah.
If you ever wondered why you get like you talk about something with a friend and then you see an ad pop up on Instagram or Facebook, that's why.
Yep.
They're listening. There's keywords. Boom.
Yeah.
Pop up.
I was going to say, this is one thing I'm not as big as probably I should be. I'm bad about it. But hey, here's a call to action. If you want to hear, I do know quite a bit about privacy and security. If you guys want to hear a podcast, we could totally do one on privacy, keeping yourself secure, some good techniques. If you guys want to know about that, maybe let us know. That'd be cool.
I think
That'd
we should, just in
If
general.
you guys want, if you guys want to hear about that.
I want to.
Oh, okay. Then, yeah, we'll do an episode on privacy.
I mean, I'm still waiting on my Faraday bag or whatever it's called.
Faraday, yeah. Well, here, how about to make you, let's read about something else, another different operation. This was we always got to throw a little bit of conspiracy current stuff going on.
Yeah. So
this was something you might have heard about, but Operation Mockingbird. So, quote, after 1953, it doesn't even set it up. The network was overseen by Allen W. Dulles, director of the CIA. By this time, Operation Mockingbird had a major influence over 25 newspapers and wire agencies. The usual methodology was placing reports developed from intelligence provided by the CIA to witting or unwitting reporters. Those reports would then be repeated or cited by the preceding reporters, which in turn would then be cited throughout the media wire services. So this was, says the Office of Policy Coordination was funded by siphoning off funds intended for the Marshall Plan, which was the rebuilding of Europe by the U.S. after World War II. Some of this money was used to bribe journalists and publishers. So in 2008, the New York Times wrote, during the early years of the Cold War, prominent writers and artists from Arthur Schlesinger Jr. to Jackson Pollock were supported, sometimes lavishly, always secretly, by the CIA as part of its propaganda war against the Soviet Union. It was perhaps the most successful use of quote-unquote soft power in American history. A CIA operative told Washington Post editor Philip Graham in a conversation about the willingness of journalists to peddle CIA propaganda and cover stories. He said, you could get a journalist cheaper than a good call girl for a couple $100 a month.
Wow.
Yeah. Famed Watergate reporter Carl Bernstein wrote in 1977, this is quite a bit I'm going to read from this guy. More than 400 American journalists in the past 25 years have secretly carried out assignments for the Central Intelligence Agency, according to documents on file at CIA headquarters. In many instances, CIA documents show journalists were engaged to perform tasks for the CIA with the consent of the managements of America's leading news organizations. Among the executives who lent their cooperation to the agencies were the heads of CBS, the Time, I don't know what magazine. Oh, Time magazine. Sorry, brain fart.
Just a small magazine that you might have heard of.
The heads of CBS, Time magazine, the New York Times, the Louisville Courier Journal, and the Copley News Service. Other organizations which cooperated with the CIA include ABC, NBC, the Associated Press, UPI, Reuters, Hearst Newspaper, Scripps Howard, Newsweek Magazine, the Mutual Broadcasting System, the Miami Herald, and the Old Saturday Evening Post and New York Herald Tribune. There is ample evidence that America's leading publishers and news executives allowed themselves and their organizations to be, so this is some of this guy, Carl Bernstein, let allowed themselves and their organizations to become handmaidens to the intelligence services. Let's not pick on some poor reporters, for God's sake, William Kobe explained at one point to the church committee's investigators. Let's get to the managements. The CIA even ran a formal training program in the 1950s to teach its agents to be journalists. Intelligence officers were taught to make noises like reporters, explained a high CIA official, and were then placed in major news organizations with help from management. Once a year during the 1950s and early 1960s, CBS correspondents joined the CIA hierarchy for private dinners and briefings. Allen Dulles often interceded with his good friend, the late Henry Luce, founder of Time and Life magazines, who readily allowed certain members of his staff to work for the agency and agreed to provide jobs and credentials for other CIA operatives who lacked journalistic experience. That's really interesting. So that's basically they're allowing these guys, which is, good. This is how the CIA operates, is that they can't always go into some country. Well, they never can go into the country and say, hey, I'm a CIA officer. So especially not if they're going undercover. So if they're trying to do stuff that get access to, certain people, it helps if they have credentials and, job stuff and, from Time magazine.
Up front. Yeah,
exactly. But it is really interesting. So I think I read most of the stuff that is important. There's a lot more about this stuff. This is a big one.
So it truly was fake news.
Well, yeah, it wasn't necessarily fake, but it was what our government wanted, and a lot of the propaganda, against the Soviet Union, which makes sense. But to kind of bring it in, basically Operation Mockingbird was the CIA's use of these newspapers and TV stations and extrapolate on that to present day and think about some of the other stuff that we talked about, different technology companies, so
if we talk about them, this podcast will never find an ear to listen to it because we'll get banned.
Yeah.
Which has already happened.
Yeah. I was going to say it's already happened. But yeah, so that was just a couple of the cool ones that I thought of that might be interesting that maybe some people might have not have heard of. So that's all I got for right now.
Well, cool. I took some notes for next week when I'm going to go over some of mine that I'm looking at. Yeah. So I got some good notes for that that we'll key off of. But what's really cool about, but what's interesting about that whole use of the media thing, I don't know if you saw that for the last couple months, there was a clip going around on various social media, and it's basically like all these newscasters
saying the exact same thing.
Yeah. And it was literally like 12 or 15 of them in the exact phrasing, the exact words and everything. And so that's like an example of what basically on a, that's like a snapshot of like what they were trying to do with this Mockingbird operation on a much larger scale. So they would basically create narratives and create, try and really build certain sentiments from the culture about certain things, whether it be communism or Russia, China, whoever the enemy was, and they would try and sway the feelings, right, and the opinions of just everyday Johnny Q. Public using the media.
Yeah,
and
good.
What's crazy is that there used to be a tremendous amount of power in print media, in TV. I mean, when I was a kid, I remember, Rosie, sitting, every night we would turn the news on and you would listen to Walter Cronkite or, Peter Jennings or one of these, there was only like three networks, right? There was no CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, none of that stuff, and it definitely wasn't 24-hour a day news.
Right.
So you'd get what you got. And so you were much more hungry and much more gullible. because the voices that you had to choose from were much fewer. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. But it was also a different time back then. I was going to say, like, Peter Jennings or those guys were not openly partisan. It was
Right.
The news was a lot more, this is the news.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Like, this is what's actually happening.
Which is why it made it so amazing that they could get away with it. You know, because it was just probably very subtle, like little stories here, little stories there. And I'm sure that the government studied responses to phrases and responses to stories. Like, this is a heart-wrenching one. This is a whatever. I mean, obviously the media does that, right?
Yeah.
They have a whole formula.
Yeah. And I was going to say, so yeah, and they definitely still do that now. Like, I don't want to talk about something that we said we weren't going to talk about, but a current news story. It is very interesting. You can go out and you can see certain news agencies, and I don't think there's any necessarily big American ones that I can think of off the top of my head that were so open about it. But there were some news stories that you could tell were broadcasting propaganda for a enemy country of ours.
Right.
Are straight up pushing Chinese propaganda. That's what they were doing. And so the stuff definitely goes on. Other countries definitely do it. If you don't think that, the Russian, Sputnik or RT, doesn't push pro Russian stuff.
Right.
That's how it works. But
well, I mean, there was a quote unquote Hong Kong reporter that was when they did a little bit of digging, that found out that this person was actually part of this, what is it, the communist, what is CPN, is that what it is, CNP, the communist CPP, yeah. And they just were on assignment in the White House to be a reporter, asking certain questions, and totally got outed. Like, totally got outed publicly. I'm sure that the president's staff knew long before that ever happened.
Yeah,
it would blow my mind if they didn't. It would blow my mind if they didn't. I'd be like, wow. But
so yeah,
that's cool, man.
Yeah, there's a couple. I was intentional. I guess maybe my brain's going to crap on the CIA today, but I was trying to pick a lot more. I didn't realize how close they were related, but there are literally thousands and thousands of stuff out there. And we'll definitely, I look forward to hearing which ones you pick next time. It'll be good.
I hope they're as good. Well,
and if it goes well, I can pick up some even more. I'll try, maybe do a third one. We'll both try to find some more good ones.
Yeah, that'd be cool. That'd be really cool.
There's so many out there.
Yeah, and it's just kind of a fun. This is a good departure from what we have been. I do want to say I'm preparing a study right now on the rapture. So we may have a guest on that is going to help us with that, or I may just do the study myself, but I want to do an episode on the rapture. I've been being asked quite a bit about it, and a lot of people are doubting it and all these other things. So I just wanted to, put that in our ear of our listeners, that coming up, we have some episodes that, we're going to get more varied again. And I think I just got tired of, I'm just tired of this stupid C word.
Yeah, me too.
The virus. So anyhow, dude, it was fun. That was a cool episode. I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Great research, man.
Thanks.
Good job. You always do a good job with that stuff. So, man, all right. Anything else you want to add?
No, I'm good.
Okay, cool. Well, that's another episode right there in the can.
Yeah.
So, we'll catch you next time on All Out.
See you guys.
Yep.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to the All Out War podcast today. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll catch you next time.